Hi everyone, Vanman here. In the previous video, we set out to see which Titan of Gen 1, Alakazam or Gyarados, could defeat Pokemon Red and Blue the fastest, with Alakazam just barely coming out on top by less than a single minute. And given how ruthlessly powerful Alakazam and Gyarados both are, I went into that project thinking it was going to be a fairly simple task. But the video ended up turning into a 90-minute documentary that took me 3 weeks to develop. So needless to say, I'm in the mood to go with something a little more straightforward this time around. Fortunately, we can all thank Alexia Wolf on Patreon, who pledged at the Master Ball level and sent in a viewer request for a Rhyhorn solo run. And considering that the bottom slots of our tier list are looking a bit sparse, I'd say now is the perfect opportunity to take her up on that offer. So today, we'll be completing the entirety of Pokemon Red and Blue with just a Rhyhorn. But first we have to ask, how powerful is Rhyhorn as a solo run Pokemon anyway? Well, to say that Rhyhorn is a bit lackluster would be putting it gently. For starters, remember how in the previous run, Alakazam steamrolled the entire game on the back of its excellent speed and special, and Gyarados did the same thanks to its diverse move pool. Well, it turns out Rhyhorn is the exact opposite. I mean, just look at these stats. Not only is its base stat total of only 315 nothing to write home about, but even worse is how those stats are distributed. Because often in solo runs, a Pokemon's strength in one area can compensate for its weakness in other areas, such as Jolteon being so fast that it can get by on less than ideal defense. But in Rhyhorn's case, sure, its 95 defense is fantastic for a first form Pokemon, but that 30 special combined with its 25 speed is just abysmal, because that means that not only will Rhyhorn almost always fail to get in the first hit in all the battles that matter, but Rhyhorn will also completely fold to special attackers. And for the cherry on top, the most abundant special attackers in the game are water types, which by the way, Rhyhorn is 4 times weak to. But wait, if you thought Rhyhorn's stats were the only thing holding it back, that's not even the whole story. Check out this move pool. Nope, I didn't just find all the most generic normal moves in the game and compile them into one list. That's Rhyhorn's entire learn set by level up. That's right, Rhyhorn learns a grand total of 0 moves by level up that aren't normal type, and the moves that it does learn aren't even very good. I mean, check this out. Rhyhorn starts at level 1 only knowing Horn Attack, then we have to wait all the way until level 30 before learning another move in the form of Stomp that's almost strictly worse. And sure, Stomp can cause a flinch, but that only works if you outspeed. And as we've established, Rhyhorn won't be doing very much of that in this run. Now, granted, Rhyhorn does have somewhat of a saving grace in its TM move pool, where it gets some hard-hitting physical attacks such as Dig, Earthquake, and Rock Slide, all of which get the same type attack bonus. But still, I really don't anticipate that Rhyhorn's handful of strengths, in the form of its excellent defense and access to a few decent TMs, will be nearly enough to make up for its other glaring weaknesses. But hey, we have seen other Pokemon on this channel perform far better than expected, so who knows? Maybe Rhyhorn will pull through with a surprise upset and complete the game faster than any of us thought possible. The complete rules for today's challenge are in the video description, but in summary, I can only use Rhyhorn in battle with no battle items, I can't use any glitches or RNG manipulation, I must save before boss battles and then reset if I lose, and finally, Rhyhorn's placement in our tier ranking will be determined by its real-world time spent completing the game while playing at 4 times speed. As a challenge for the viewer, everyone pause the video now to make a prediction in the comments for Rhyhorn's final time of completion, then after the video is over, come back and edit your comment to describe how accurate your prediction was. And in addition to commenting, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss another installment. And now, let's dive into our attempt to beat Pokemon Red and Blue with just a Rhyhorn. To begin the run, we must first alter the game to replace the Bulbasaur starter with Rhyhorn, causing the rival to choose Charmander. And in this first battle against the rival, we actually do see Rhyhorn's greatest strength coming to bear, because its massive defense causes Charmander's Scratch to deal all of 1 damage, before Horn Attack brings Charmander to about half, and another Scratch deals yet another singular point of damage, before another Horn Attack takes out the Fire Lizard. And at least in the early game, battles that look like that will be a running theme moving forward, because very nearly every battle until around Celadon City use Pokemon that attack with only physical moves, and of those, almost all of them are either normal or poison type, which Rhyhorn resists. so at the very least, we can head into each of the battles without any fear of blacking out. Plus, we can even save a little bit of time not needing to worry about healing with potions along the way. And to prove my point, after we complete the Oaks Parcel mission and head into Viridian Forest, we knock out all the bug catchers for experience, and when we make it to the final bug catcher guarding the exit of the forest, his Weedle opens with Poison Sting, and even after a critical hit, the Poison Sting once again only inflicts a single point of damage. Then in the next turn, when Weedle goes for Poison Sting again, the game text says that the attack missed, but Poison Sting is 100% accurate. So what's going on here? Well, that's actually not a Gen 1 miss as you might think. In this case, Poison Sting is dealing so little damage that the game rounds the damage output down to 0. But since the game has no way of indicating 0 damage, it just says that the attack missed instead. So effectively in this fight, with the exception of a critical hit, Weedle can't even hit us. And just to add insult to injury, in the middle of the battle, Rhyhorn runs out of Horn Attack power points and finishes off the Weedle with struggle. Then, after defeating the bug catcher, exiting Viridian Forest, and making it to Pewter City, we heal our Horn Attack power points at the Poké Center, quickly dispatch of the junior trainer in the Pewter Gym, and take on Brock. However, as well as Rhyhorn has performed so far, against Brock is where the portion of the run that we take out the opposing Pokemon for free without any fear of retaliation comes to a screeching halt, because both Brock's Geodude and Onix are two of the small handful of Pokemon in the entire game that actually have even greater defense than Rhyhorn. So what this means is that, although Rhyhorn's opening Horn Attacks look to be dealing 2 to 3 damage to Geodude, after Geodude uses a couple of defense curls, we transition to dealing only 1 damage per attack. And on top of that, we went into this fight at such a low level that Geodude's tackles are dealing not 1 but 2 damage in retaliation back to us. So at this point, we now just have to hope that Geodude will use as many defense curls and as few tackles as possible, so that we have enough HP remaining for Onix. And after a long exchange against Geodude, we end up going into Onix at just over half health. But it's still not enough, because the fact that Geodude required so many hits to knock out means that Rhyhorn only has 3 Horn Attacks left. And to make matters worse, Onix outspeeds and opens with Bide, which Rhyhorn has no choice but to attack into. And now it's here that the writing is on the wall, because between the retaliation damage from Bide combined with the recoil from Struggle after we run out of Horn Attack power points, there's just no way that Rhyhorn can possibly survive, and we black out with Onix still in green health. So obviously we have to go out and train to a higher level in order to have any chance at this fight. But what level does Rhyhorn actually need to obtain to come out victorious? Well, our goal is to reach a point where we can deal more than 1 damage to Geodude per attack, so that we have plenty of Horn Attack power points remaining for Onix, which means that we also have to hope that Geodude uses mostly Tackle rather than Defense Curl. However, that strategy is somewhat of a catch-22, because if Geodude does use only Tackle, that also means that we'll be at lower health going into Onix. So to get around this, we also have to get to a high enough level that Geodude's Tackle will only deal 1 damage to Rhyhorn instead of 2 like last time. And as we continue to train in Viridian Forest, we come across yet another aspect of this run that slows down Rhyhorn even further, which is its experience group. Because you see, not all Pokemon in the game level up at the same rate. Rather, some Pokemon require more experience to grow from one level to the next than others, and it turns out Rhyhorn is in the slow experience group, which is mostly reserved for legendary Pokemon and Pokemon found exclusively in the Safari Zone. I think it's because the game designers wanted to give a sense of epic proportion to these Pokemon that are so rare or otherwise difficult to find. But in the case of Rhyhorn, it just ends up being nothing more than a nuisance. So, thanks to Rhyhorn's slow experience group, it takes us a full 7 minutes to train from level 10 only up to level 14, at which point we finally head back to the Pewter Gym to face Brock again. And this time, our battle against Geodude goes just as planned, because our first couple Horn Attacks get Geodude all the way down to about 2/3 health, and Geodude's Tackle is indeed only dealing a single damage to Rhyhorn. And although Geodude does start to use a few defense curls later down the line, after we eventually take out the Geodude, that still leaves us with a full 45 HP and 12 Horn Attacks remaining for Onix. But against Onix, it again opens with the worst possible move in the form of Bide, considering that Bide is a set damage move that doesn't take Rhyhorn's defense into account. And on top of that, this Bide lasts for the full 3 turns instead of only 2. And when it unleashes energy, we go to about 2/3 health, while Onix still sits comfortably at almost full. Then Onix goes for yet another Bide, and this one lasts for 2 turns to bring us to about half health. However, our luck starts turning around for the better when Onix goes for Screech to lower our defense, followed by a few tackles which, even in spite of the Screech, still only inflict 2 damage each. All the while Horn Attack continues to chip Onix down to yellow. Then Onix goes for another Screech, and at this point we've run out of Horn Attack power points and have to resort to Struggle. However, after we initiate the struggle, Onix just manages one more tackle before going for yet another Bide while it's in red health. So now, whether we win or lose will just depend on whether we can knock out the Onix before its Bide completes, and whether we can outpace the Struggle recoil. So, we use Struggle to bring Onix even further into red, then Struggle again to bring Onix to a sliver, while we have plenty of health remaining to tank the next bit of recoil. Alright, moment of truth. If this is a 2-turn Bide, Onix will unleash energy and knock us out. If it's a 3-turn Bide, we win the battle. So, we go for Struggle one last time, and luckily it must have been a 3-turn Bide because our attack lands on the Onix to knock it out and finally win us the Boulder Badge at 13 minutes and 21 seconds. Certainly not the fastest Brock split in the world, but we have seen Pokemon with slower Brock splits end up as high as the A tier, so we'll just have to wait and see how this run continues to play out for Rhyhorn. After defeating Brock, we sweep through the trainers on Route 3 in Mount Moon, and these battles are again just a recapitulation of the rival battle and the bug catchers in Viridian Forest. Because Tackle, Scratch, Quick Attack, Hyper Fang, Pound, none of these early game normal moves actually mean anything to Rhyhorn, and we can just brush them off like it's nothing. In fact, on our journey towards Cerulean City, Rhyhorn never takes more than 2 damage from any given attack, literally the entire time, allowing us to make it to Cerulean only 5 minutes after defeating Brock. And since I think it should be pretty obvious that Rhyhorn is nowhere near ready to face Misty, we instead head to take on Rival 2. And here, the list of attacking moves on the Rival's team are Gust and Quick Attack from Pidgeotto, Tackle, Quick Attack and Hyper Fang from Rattata, and Scratch and Dimber from Charmander, all of which are not very effective moves that can only deal a blip to Rhyhorn, so while Misty remains out of the question, the Rival is again a complete joke, and we sweep his team with green health remaining. Then after defeating the Rival, Rhyhorn sweeps through Nugget Bridge on the way to Bill's house with no issue, that is, with one major exception, because the very last trainer before making it to Bill's house is a lass who wields not one but 2 of the mighty, the all-powerful, level 13 Oddish. And if you ever needed confirmation that Misty's water-type attacks would be too much for Rhyhorn to handle, just consider that in this battle against the lass, Absorb, with only 20 power, used by a Pokemon that's 8 points underleveled, still saps over a quarter of Rhyhorn's HP, in comparison to the 1 or 2 HP that all the other attacks have inflicted so far. A sober reminder for what's to come in the mid to late game when special attackers start becoming more common. But regardless, in this fight Rhyhorn is still overleveled enough that we claim the victory, after which we grab the SS ticket from Bill, escape rope to Cerulean, and defeat the Rocket guarding the exit of the city who gifts us with the TM for Dig, a 100 power ground move which will serve as Rhyhorn's principal attacking move for the next big chunk of the run. Then, after teaching Dig to Rhyhorn, we depart from Cerulean City toward Vermilion City, and as we begin our trek across Route 6, I just want to mention that before playing this run, I sat down and meticulously theory-crafted every aspect of Rhyhorn's playthrough, trying to come up with Rhyhorn's optimal moveset for every major battle. And eventually I came up with a long-term plan that's a little unconventional, but I still think will give us our best chance at victory. And as we see here, the first step on that plan is to head to the SSN to pick up not only the TM for Body Slam as usual, but also the TM for Rest, which is a move that restores the user to full health at the cost of putting the user to sleep for 2 turns. Because while there are a lot of special attackers in the game that Rhyhorn is weak to, there are also a lot of physical attackers that will not be able to inflict very much damage while Rhyhorn is sleeping, thus allowing us to use Rest against Pokemon who are not a threat to set up in preparation for other Pokemon who are. However, if you needed yet even more confirmation that we're not ready for Misty, guarding the TM for Rest is a Sailor whose second Pokemon is a level 18 Staryu, and in this battle, Staryu opens with Water Gun to bring Rhyhorn from almost full health to only a quarter. And although Staryu does go down to Dig in the next turn, take a wild guess which Pokemon is first in the lineup on Misty's team in the battle against her. That's right, a level 18 Staryu with Water Gun. So needless to say, if the Sailor Staryu was such a formidable threat just now, we don't stand a chance against Misty, who has not only the exact same Staryu, but also a Starmie, which is 3 levels higher, has better stats, and knows Bubble Beam in addition to Water Gun. But regardless, after defeating the Sailor and acquiring Rest, we head to face Rival 3. And unlike the previous Rival who didn't have any Pokemon that could inflict heavy damage, this Rival has a Kadabra that knows Confusion that it could use to exploit Rhyhorn's poor defense stat. However, this Kadabra is only 50% to use Confusion, and 50% to use Teleport, which has no no effect in battle. And fortunately in this battle, Kadabra opts for the latter, allowing us to knock it out with Body Slam in the next turn and win the battle in decisive fashion. However, you all know what's coming next, because after defeating the rival and acquiring the HM for cut from the ship's captain, we're completely barred from progressing across the Kanto map even further than we have, because both the Vermilion Gym and Route 9 leading to Rock Tunnel are walled off behind cut trees, and Misty's Cascade badge is required for using cut outside of battle. So, before leaving the SSN, we knock out just a few more trainers for experience, then dig our way back to Cerulean City in the hopes that we've made it to a high enough level to get past her. But before I show you the fight, let's talk about our route to victory. First of all, Misty, like all gym leaders, has what's called good AI, meaning that she will prioritize super effective moves, in turn meaning that her Staryu will always use Water Gun, and her Starmie will use either Water Gun or Bubble Beam. However, there's also a chance that Misty will use X-Defend on her Pokemon, so at least in theory, the way we can win this fight is to outspeed and one-shot Staryu with Dig, then survive a single Water Gun from Starmie, retaliate with Dig, then on the next turn have Misty use X-Defend, after which we take out Starmie on the next turn with another Dig. Granted, that is a very specific sequence of events that have to happen before we even have a chance, but no use talking about it any further. Let's dive into the battle and see how this strategy pans out. To start, Misty leads with Staryu, and wow, are you serious? That's just incredible! Rhyhorn is 8 levels above Misty's Staryu, and it still outspeeds and brings us to yellow with Water Gun. Well, that entire plan that we crafted earlier is now completely out the window, because although Staryu does go down to Dig, Starmie's Bubble Beam promptly knocks us out in the next turn. And although I did go on to try the Misty battle a few more times just out of spite, on every attempt we were met with the same fate. So, unfortunately, it looks like we have no choice but to go out and train yet again to a point that we can outspeed the Staryu. So, we head back south to knock out all the trainers on Route 6 and Route 11, then come back to face Misty 3 levels higher. So, how does this Misty battle play out? Well, it turns out that even at level 29, a full 11 points above Misty's Staryu, the Staryu still manages to outspeed and open with Water Gun to deal almost half. And although Dig does obviously get the one-shot, Starmie also outspeeds and finishes us off with another Water Gun. And yes, that attack would have gotten the knockout even without the critical hit. So now at this point we face a dilemma, because we can either go out and train even further, or we can just try this fight over and over again until we get lucky with Misty using her X-Defends. Well, considering that we've already cleared out all the local trainers in the area, meaning that if we trained again it would have to be against wild Pokemon, which is much less efficient, and considering Rhyhorn's slow level up rate on top of that, I figured it would be faster just to fish for the lucky battle instead of training. So we try the fight again, and this attempt goes just the same as the first, with Staryu getting off a Water Gun, then Starmie finishing off Rhyhorn with another Water Gun. So we try the fight again, and you'll never guess what happens. That's right, the exact same thing. But then finally in the fourth attempt, Staryu brings us to half with Water Gun as usual, but in the fight against Starmie, Misty opens with X-Defend, after which Rhyhorn's Dig lands a critical hit for the knockout, finally winning us the Cascade badge. And by the way, it should be noted here that that battle was extremely unlikely, because Misty is only 25% to use X-Defend, and Rhyhorn is only about 5% to critical hit. So that exact sequence of X-Defend followed by a critical hit is just over 1%. Granted, that wasn't our only out to victory, because it's also possible that Misty uses multiple X-Defends, but even so, winning that fight on only the 4th attempt, or the 8th attempt if you count the battles prior to us leveling up, is still far better than average luck. But now that we have the Cascade badge, our options are either to head south to Vermilion to defeat Lieutenant Surge, or exit Cerulean City to the east and backtrack to defeat Surge later. And since we're already in Cerulean City, I figured it would be faster to take the latter option, and we trek through Route 9 and Rock Tunnel. And although there are quite a few Pokemon on our journey that hold a type advantage against Rhyhorn, we're still over-leveled enough at this point that we managed to outspeed and one-shot everything along the way, allowing us to make it to Celadon City in painless fashion. Granted, it took us longer to arrive in Celadon than it took Alakazam to beat the entire game, but we're playing with a Rhyhorn, people. What more do you expect? So, upon arriving in Celadon, we head to the department store to complete our usual shopping errands, as well as buy an extra soda pop from the vending machine to exchange for the TM for one of Rhyhorn's best coverage moves. Because as powerful as Dig, and later Earthquake, are in most situations, we still need a move that can hit flying Pokemon, and that's where Rock Slide comes into play. Then after completing the shopping errands, we head just west of Celadon to acquire the HM for Fly, but as usual in runs where we skip Lieutenant Surge, we can't actually use Fly outside of battle just yet because we have to earn Surge's Thunder Badge first. So because of that, we instead walk through Celadon City and Saffron City down to Vermilion, use Dig to one-shot all of Surge's team to the surprise of exactly no one, winning us the Thunder Badge, then fly to Lavender Town to take on Rival 4, who for most Pokemon is actually one of the easiest rival battles in the entire run. In fact, just in preparation for this video, I sent a message to our PokeTuber Discord asking other Pokemon Challenge runners which rival battle they thought was the easiest in the game, and the answers were pretty evenly divided between Rival 3 on the SSN and Rival 4 in Lavender Tower. However, for Rhyhorn, it's a different story, because first up on the Rivals team is Pidgeotto, and although there's virtually no chance that Pidgeotto can actually knock us out, it does outspeed and hit us with 2 sand attacks, causing us to miss a total of 4 rock slides before the 5th one finally connects for the knockout. Up next is Execute, and just like Pidgeotto, Execute also poses no threat of actually knocking us out, but since Execute's only moves are Hypnosis and Barrage, that allows it to open with Hypnosis to put us to sleep and then spam Barrage. And although Barrage is dealing only tiny chip damage to Rhyhorn each time it hits, the danger of the fight against Execute is not the risk of actually fainting. No, the danger here is just how much time this battle wastes, even if we eventually get the win, because Barrage, being a multi-turn move, takes forever to finish. And once Rhyhorn finally wakes up from its nap, our accuracy is so low from the prior sand attack that gives Execute the chance to put us to sleep once more and start the whole process all over again. So, realizing that would be our ultimate fate if I didn't take action, I just decided to reset preemptively and start the battle over. In the next attempt, Pidgeotto doesn't use Sand Attack on turn 1, but then Rock Slide, being only 90% accurate, unfortunately gets its 10% chance to miss, and Pidgeotto punishes us for that bad luck with another Sand Attack, yet again causing us to miss several more Rock Slides in a row before the next one connects. Then against Execute, it's the same story as last time, in that it puts Rhyhorn to sleep and spams Barrage, but since in this battle we were only hit with a single sand attack instead of 2 like in the previous attempt, I decide to power through the fight and patiently wait for Rhyhorn to wake up so we can take out the Execute with Body Slam. However, third in the Rivals lineup is Gyarados, and although Rhyhorn's attack stat is high enough that Rock Slide will one-shot Gyarados if it hits, this Gyarados, just like Misty Starmie from earlier, has good AI that will cause it to always use Hydro Pump. And since Gyarados will outspeed, our only out to victory is for the 80% accurate Hydro Pump to miss. And indeed, Hydro Pump does fortunately miss, but then so does our Rock Slide thanks to the Sand Attack from earlier, allowing the next Hydro Pump to land and obviously knock us out. Then, as we go into our third attempt against the rival, again Pidgeotto's Sand Attack causes the Execute fight to take forever, this time eating up a full 37 seconds on the real-time clock, before I just bit the bullet and reset yet again. And it was also at that point that I decided that because Pidgeotto's Sand Attack causes the Execute fight to take up so much time, from now on we would just automatically reset if Pidgeotto ever landed a Sand Attack even once. So after a couple more battles with Pidgeotto getting off its Sand Attack and forcing a reset, that eventually brings us to attempt number 6, where Pidgeotto finally goes for Gust instead. But alas, Rock Slide still misses. Then Pidgeotto fortunately goes for another Gust before the next Rock Slide takes it out. Then, because we finally go into Execute with our accuracy fully intact, we actually take out the Execute in a timely fashion this time around. But Gyarados again abruptly puts an end to our plans with another Hydro Pump. But then, in attempts number 7 and 8, something very peculiar happens, which is that these attempts are near carbon copies of attempt number 6. In that all 3 of these fights opened with Pidgeotto using Gust, which is 25% to happen, then Rhyhorn missing Rock Slide, which is 10% to happen, then knocking out Pidgeotto with Rock Slide on the next turn, which is 90% to happen, then Rhyhorn paralyzing Execute with Body Slam, which is 30% to happen. So what in the world is going on here? I mean, that exact sequence occurring 3 times in a row is not strictly impossible, but it is still wildly improbable. For example, the odds of the initial Rock Slide missing 3 times in a row alone is 1 in 1,000. Well, what I think might be happening is a sort of accidental RNG manipulation. In other words, after having played so much Gen 1 Pokemon on a regular basis lately, I have unironically started to notice that certain events that are supposed to be random are actually a lot less random than they should be. Because in Pokemon, the code that generates the outcomes of supposedly random events is influenced by the inputs of the player's controller. And under normal circumstances, that process is sufficient to generate apparently random results. But the problem comes from the fact that that code resets to a predetermined value every time you restart the game, and open the old save file. And by the way, that's exactly how speedrunners are able to manipulate the outcome of a whole host of pseudo-random events, such as getting a Nidoran to spawn in Route 22, turning off all the wild encounters in Mount Moon, and so on, by saving the game at a very specific moment, hard resetting the save file, and then executing a series of particular button presses in order to set the RNG to a desired value. Well, in this series of battles against Rival 4, I think it's entirely possible that I was unintentionally doing something very similar by repeating the same inputs over and over, thus causing the battle sequence to play out in a very similar fashion every time. But thankfully, that Doctor Strange style time loop ends up being relatively short-lived, because on only the 9th attempt, Pidgeotto finally opens with a Whirlwind and goes down to the first Rock Slide. Then Execute is two-shot with Body Slam, and Gyarados finally misses its Hydro Pump and allows Rock Slide to take it out as well. And now that we've made it past the Gyarados, we've functionally won, because even in spite of Kadabra's superior speed and special, we're still so over-leveled that we can tank anything Kadabra throws at us, and in this case Kadabra just goes for the useless Teleport anyway, before going down to Body Slam. And finally, our type advantage against Charmeleon makes it a complete triviality, finally allowing us to make it past probably the most annoying Rival 4 fight since our Ditto run. And while we're at it, before resuming the run, I do also want to show you a little demonstration first, because I know that if I don't, I'm going to get the inevitable comment that says, "Vanman, Lieutenant Surge gave you the TM for Thunderbolt. Why didn't you teach it to Rhyhorn to use against Gyarados? Don't you know that Gyarados is 4 times weak to it?" Well, yes, that's true, but just to demonstrate why that's not a good idea, before attempting the Rival 4 fight, I paused my timer, taught Thunderbolt to Rhyhorn, and initiated an unofficial battle off the clock for the purpose of showing just how inferior Rhyhorn's special stat really is. Because in this battle, Pidgeotto survives Thunderbolt in the red, and Gyarados, even with its 4 times weakness to electric attacks, survives in the red as well. So in this case, yes, Rock Slide is most definitely the preferable move to use against Flying-type Pokemon, thanks to Rhyhorn's superior attack stat, and thanks to the same type attack bonus, even in spite of Rock Slide's less than perfect accuracy. So at this point, we're heading to complete the Lavender Tower mission and acquire the Pokeflute at just over 49 minutes on the real-time clock, which is about the time when an S-tier Pokemon would be making their way through the Elite Four, and about the time that an A-tier Pokemon would be wrapping up the final couple gyms to make their way to Victory Road. And Rhyhorn hasn't even earned its 4th gym badge, so needless to say, Rhyhorn's performance so far has been pretty lackluster overall. But up next, we actually head into a portion of the game where Rhyhorn starts to pick up its pace, because after exiting Lavender Tower, we cycle down to Fuchsia City to complete the Safari Zone mission, then head to the Fuchsia Gym, take out several of the gym trainers for experience, and take on Koga. And in this battle, even in spite of Rhyhorn's poor speed, we're still at a high enough level that we manage to outspeed and one-shot the initial coughing with Dig. Then, although we don't outspeed Muck, our defense is so high that it does very little with Sludge, but unfortunately Sludge also poisons. Dig then takes Muck down to red health, and Muck retaliates with another Sludge and goes down to Body Slam. The second coughing is a repeat of the first, and now out comes Wheezing. And here we could go for Dig, but the problem with that is that if a Pokemon uses Dig while it's inflicted with poison, it takes poison damage during not just one but both turns that Dig is active. And since Wheezing has an even higher defense than Muck, I already know in advance that Dig is not going to one-shot. So, to play around the possibility of taking lots of poison damage and Wheezing surviving our attack and chipping our health down to 0, I decide to make use of the strategy that I mentioned all the way back in the SSN and go for Rest to heal back to full and also get rid of our poison infliction, after which Wheezing deals very little damage with a Smog into Sludge. However, after Rhyhorn wakes up, Wheezing goes for its best possible line of play in the form of Toxic, which is really scary because if we assume that Dig is a 2-shot on the Wheezing, that will give Toxic a full 4 turns to accumulate. However, at this point I still think we're at high enough health that we should be in the clear to go ahead and attack. And so we go for Dig to bring Wheezing to yellow. Wheezing gets off a Sludge that does almost nothing. Toxic damage brings us to yellow, but it's not enough to knock us out before one final Dig knocks out the Wheezing and wins us the Soul Badge in decisive fashion. Then, after defeating Koga, we really only have one option for where to head next, because the Saffron and Cinnabar gyms are blocked off until we complete the Silphco mission, and Rhyhorn is most certainly not ready to take on Erica's powerful grass types in the Celadon gym. However, unlike Misty from earlier, it's possible to delay the Erica fight until much later in the game when we're at a higher level. So, onward to Silphco it is. And upon arriving in Silphco, we begin by poking our head into a couple of extra rooms to pick up a few vitamins to boost our stats, as well as a rare candy Fairy and the TM for Earthquake, which is a move that's functionally the same as Dig, except that the user doesn't go underground in the first turn. Then, after picking up all those items, we head to face the infamous Rival 5. And unlike the previous rival, according to our community of Pokemon Challenge runners, Rival 5 was tied only with the champion for the most difficult rival battle in the game, in no small part because his Pokemon all got a massive level boost since the previous rival battle, plus his entire team with the exception of Execute is now fully evolved, and all the Pokemon have much more fleshed out and threatening movesets. We go into this fight with the exact same strategy as in the previous rival battle, which is to hope that Pidgeot uses some other move besides Sand Attack, and that Gyarados will get its 1 in 5 chance to miss with Hydro Pump. To start, Pidgeot fortunately opens with Whirlwind and goes down to Rock Slide, which is great news because Pidgeot is at a high enough level that I wasn't certain if we would get the one-shot. Then we go for Rock Slide against Execute to deal about half, and Execute uses Leech Seed and goes down to another Rock Slide in the next turn. Now out comes Gyarados. It goes for Hydro Pump, and it misses, giving us a sliver of hope, but those hopes are soon crushed because so does Rock Slide, allowing the next Hydro Pump to land for the knockout. And now, it's montage time, because unfortunately that battle was the closest we would get to victory for quite some time, and we ended up just having to play the slot machine over and over again, simply hoping that we would get the perfect luck on each attempt. Reason being that the first 3 Pokemon in the Rivals lineup all have some way of stopping us in our tracks. That is, Sand Attack from Pidgeot, Stun Spore and Leech Seed from Execute, and Hydro Pump from Gyarados. So, while yes, we may have a reasonable chance of getting through any one of those obstacles, the odds of making it past all 3 of them in the same sitting are extremely slim. And to make matters worse, the Rivals' disruptive tactics of Sand Attack, Stun Spore, and Leech Seed all synergize with one another in such a way that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Because the lowered accuracy from Sand Attack makes it more likely that we will get hit with Stun Spore, which in turn makes it more likely that we will get hit with Leech Seed. And since Sand Attack and Stun Spore do such a good job of conspiring to prevent us from landing our attacks, that gives time for Leech Seed to restore Execute's HP, thus making it a 3-shot instead of a 2-shot. And at this point, I know what many of you are thinking, but Vanman, why do you keep resetting? Wouldn't it be faster just to go out and train to a higher level so you can outspeed? And the answer is, most definitely not, because Rhyhorn is so ridiculously slow, and Pidgeot and Gyarados are so ridiculously fast by comparison, that we would have to train all the way up to the mid-70s to outspeed them. So, as of now, we're resigned to a fate that looks like this. And although it required a total of 23 resets, on attempt number 24, we fortunately get a run in which Pidgeot uses Quick Attack and goes down to Rock Slide, Execute takes 2 Rock Slides without using Stun Spore, and Gyarados misses its Hydro Pump, after which Rock Slide connects for the knockout, finally allowing us to go into Alakazam for the first time. And here, just like in the previous rival battle, we're at a high enough level that we can tank a single Confusion from Alakazam in the yellow and knock it out with Earthquake, after which Charizard doesn't stand a chance against a 4 times effective Rock Slide, finally allowing us to make it past Rival 5 after a full 8 minutes worth of attempts. But now, even though getting past Rival 5 was a real nuisance, just like the portion of the game after Rival 4, the next long stretch of the run actually turns out to be quite painless for Rhyhorn, because Earthquake totally trivializes the Giovanni fight to allow us to complete the Silphco mission, thus dismantling Team Rocket's takeover of Saffron City and allowing us access into this house to pick up the TM from Mimic, which, in addition to Rest, will serve to fill in the gaps of Rhyhorn's otherwise unimpressive move pool for the remainder of the run. So, with Mimic in hand, we immediately surf down to Cinnabar Island and into the Pokemon Mansion. While in the mansion, we spend a few minutes using our type advantage to knock out all the trainers with their fire, poison, and electric Pokemon for some extra much-needed experience, then head to the Cinnabar Gym to do the same against the trainers there, after which we take on Blaine. And as you might suspect, Rhyhorn's type advantage makes this battle a complete cinch, but that's not even the whole story, because now that we have access to Mimic, all we have to do is copy the opening Growlithe agility to buff up our speed, which works beautifully because while we initiate the setup, Growlithe just spams its own agility and deals exactly 0 damage before we outspeed and one-shot it with a super effective Earthquake, after which the entire rest of Blaine's team meets the same fate one by one, winning us the Volcano Badge in what was undoubtedly the surest victory of the entire run. Then up next, we head back to Saffron City on our way to fight Sabrina. But first, I decide to make a pit stop in the fighting dojo, and we spend 1 single minute very quickly knocking out all the trainers there, then head straight to the Saffron Gym. And although Rhyhorn, with its abysmal special stat, is heading to face a team of Pokemon with some of the highest special in the entire game, I'm still not too worried because we finally have enough utility moves in the form of Mimic and Rest that I actually think we'll be able to claim victory without too much trouble. So, let's kick off the battle battle and see if Rhyhorn can hold its own. To start, Kadabra outspeeds and opens with a Psybeam to deal about a third damage and also confuse us, but luckily we power through the confusion and knock out Kadabra with Earthquake. But up next we have Mr. Mime, and it turns out that this fight against Mr. Mime is the glue that holds the entire rest of this battle together, because our plan is to mimic Light Screen to survive the onslaught from the upcoming Alakazam. Unfortunately though, when we try that, Mr. Mime's confusion brings us down to yellow health, and to make matters worse, Rhyhorn hits itself in confusion instead of using Mimic. So this is not good news, because if Rhyhorn continues to hit itself while Mr. Mime continues attacking, that could easily force another reset. But fortunately on the next turn, Mr. Mime just goes for Barrier instead of actually attacking, and Rhyhorn snaps out of confusion, mimics Light Screen, uses Light Screen, then uses Rest to heal back up to full, all the while Mr. Mime just spams its setup moves over and over. Then while Rhyhorn is asleep, Mr. Mime does get off another confusion, but it only does a blip thanks to Light Screen, after which we wake up and use Earthquake, which only does about a third thanks to Mr. Mime's Barrier. But a couple more Earthquakes still manage to take it out no problem. And now against Venomoth, we really want it to use either Leech Life or Psybeam, but instead it goes for the worst of all possible moves in the form of Stun Spore to inflict paralysis. But now that Rhyhorn is paralyzed going into Alakazam, the best play here is just to spam Earthquake and hope that we can power through the paralysis, because the alternative would be to use Rest to cure the paralysis, but that would only give Alakazam more opportunity to attack. So, moment of truth, Alakazam outspeeds with Psywave to bring us into yellow, we go for Earthquake, and it lands on Alakazam for the knockout, winning us the Marsh Badge. And you know, after that battle, I couldn't help but contemplate just how long the fight against Sabrina would have taken without the innovation of Rest and Mimic. My guess is that it would have eaten up even more time than the Rival 5 fight, simply because the Psychic type attacks from Kadabra and Alakazam would have been so devastating without the Light Screen setup. But fortunately, a little bit of creativity came through and provided us with an out to victory. But regardless, with 6 of the 8 gym badges in our pocket, we fly back to Celadon City to face Erica, and our plan here is very similar to what it was for Sabrina, because Victory Bell will likely outspeed and deal massive damage with Razor Leaf, then faint to a single Earthquake, after which we can use the fight against a much less threatening Tangela to rest in preparation for Vileplume. But as we kick off the battle, it turns out that that plan is not even necessary, because Rhyhorn is so overleveled at this point that we manage to outspeed and one-shot the Victory Bell, outspeed and one-shot the Tangela, and finally outspeed and one-shot the Vileplume as well for a surprising flawless victory, winning us the Rainbow Badge. And in case you thought Rhyhorn's winning streak would be over by now, up next we head to the Viridian Gym, knock out the gym trainers for quick experience, then face Giovanni. And in this battle, all we have to do is use Earthquake against the opposing Rhyhorn, who goes down in one hit. Then, although Dugtrio outspeeds with a devastating dig to bring us to yellow, Dugtrio's defense is so low that it too is one shot with Earthquake in the next turn. And against Nidoqueen, the fact that its attacking moves are so unthreatening, thanks to both our massive defense and our type resistance, gives us the green light to heal up with Rest, just to play it as safe as possible for the remainder of the battle. Unfortunately though, Nidoqueen's initial body slam paralyzes and prevents us from actually using Rest for a couple turns, but even then, Nidoqueen only manages to get us to red health before Rest finally comes through, allowing us to restore our health, wake up, and then spam Earthquake to knock out the rest of the team, winning us the Earth Badge. And now that we've earned all 8 gym badges, we can head to face the last battle of the run prior to the Elite Four, Rival 6. And given how painstaking the Rival 4 and Rival 5 fights were for us earlier, you might be tempted to think that this rival would be just the same as before. But in this fight, there's one crucial difference that turns the battle from a complete grind to a complete joke, which is that Pidgeot's Sand Attack has now been replaced with Agility, meaning that we can mimic Agility without fear of any accuracy-lowering shenanigans, then set up Agility, and proceed to outspeed and one-shot the entire team, allowing us to move on to Victory Road in painless fashion. Or at least we would move on to Victory Road, except that now we have a couple more errands to run, because if you know anything about Gen 1 solo runs, you know that as well as a ground-type Pokemon may perform leading up to the Elite Four, the very first member of the Elite Four, Lorelei, can often act like a total brick wall to stop us in our tracks, especially for a Pokemon like Rhyhorn with such poor special that will completely fold to the likes of Aurora Beam and Hydro Pump. So in light of that, we head to the Rocket Hideout to pick up an extra rare candy, then to the power plant to pick up another rare candy, then head back to Victory Road, wherein we take on lots of the trainers there for yet more experience. So yeah, I'm really scared of the upcoming Lorelei fight if you couldn't tell, and so because of that, I want to be as prepared for her as possible, especially considering that her Pokemon are not actually that fast, so it is feasible that we could reach a high enough level to outspeed her team. But now that we've scavenged the Kanto map for every rare candy in the game and cleared out all of Victory Road, there's nothing left to do but enter the Indigo Plateau, feed all but one of our remaining rare candies to level up to 65, and cross our fingers that that will be enough to stand a chance at Lorelei. So to kick off the battle, it's here that we finally get to see whether all of our training has paid off. And it turns out, yes it does, and we outspeed the Dugong to one-shot it with a super effective Rock Slide. So now we can breathe a sigh of relief, because Cloyster is even slower than Dugong, meaning that we outspeed Cloyster as well. This time, however, Cloyster survives in the red thanks to it having the highest defense stat in the game, but luckily that puts it in range for Lorelei to use a super potion, and it goes down in the next turn. And now that we've made it past Cloyster, we functionally won, because now all we have to do is mimic Slowbro's Amnesia to badge boost our speed and attack, and after that setup is complete, we spam Earthquake to take out the Slowbro, which takes several hits thanks to Slowbro spamming Withdraw, after which Jinx and Lapras are both outsped in one shot with Rock Slide for a super clutch victory. I'll be honest with you, I did not anticipate Lorelei being such a breeze to get past. I suppose all of our prior training really paid off this time around. But regardless, up next we have Bruno, who, like Lorelei, you might think would be a bit of a challenge thanks to Rhyhorn's weakness to his team's fighting type attacks, but as we head into the battle, it turns out we can mitigate that weakness entirely by implementing a strategy that we've never actually seen on this channel before, which is to mimic the opening Onix's Harden to badge boost our speed and attack, just like we did with Slowbro's Amnesia a moment ago, so that we can outspeed the Onix who just barely survives an Earthquake thanks to an X Defend, after which Onix goes down, Hitmonchan goes down, Hitmonlee goes down, the second Onix goes down, then we level up to negate our badge boost, allowing Machamp to survive in the yellow, but it doesn't even matter at this point because Machamp just leers before going down in the next turn. Then up next we head to face Agatha, who for Rhyhorn represents by far the most luck-based fight in the entire game, reason being that her AI is programmed to attack randomly between a whole host of moves that sometimes do nothing on the one hand, and sometimes completely prevent you from playing the game on the other hand. And as we start the battle, I initially considered the strategy of mimicking the opening Gengar's Hypnosis to make the battle more consistent, but then I thought Hypnosis is only really useful if the enemy Pokemon require multiple hits to knock out. But in Rhyhorn's case, Earthquake and Rock Slide will likely one-shot all of Agatha's team, thus making Hypnosis totally pointless. So because of that, all we can do is just spam our attacking moves and hope that Agatha will cooperate. To start, we go for Earthquake against the first Gengar, but Agatha preemptively switches out to Golbat, causing Earthquake to miss thanks to Golbat's immunity to ground-type attacks. Then Golbat confuses us with Confuse Ray, and Rhyhorn hits itself in confusion, followed by a wing attack from Golbat. But then luckily on the next turn, Rhyhorn spites the confusion and knocks out Golbat with Rock Slide. Gengar then comes back out and hits us with Nightshade before going down to Earthquake, and the same thing happens against Haunter to bring us to Yellow. Then against Arbok, our plan is to use Rest in preparation for the final Gengar, which works out perfectly because after Rhyhorn restores its health and then wakes up, Agatha switches out to Gengar, who immediately goes down to Earthquake. And finally, Arbok outspeeds with a weak bite that does almost nothing before it too goes down. So clearly in that scenario, we lucked out with a super clutch first attempt victory in a battle that definitely could have gone much worse for us and eaten up way more time than it actually did. But with as many resets as we had against Rival 5 in this run, I'd say our fight against Agatha just managed to balance out our luck overall. And now as we head to face against Lance, our strategy here is exactly the same as it was against Rivals 4 and 5, which is to keep resetting until Gyarados' Hydro Pump misses and knock it out with Rock Slide. Fortunately though, this process against Lance doesn't take nearly as long as it did against the two rivals, for no other reason than that Gyarados is first in Lance's lineup, meaning that here we don't have to wade through such a long drawn-out battle like we did against the rivals Pidgeot and Execute. And it turns out that in this particular run, we managed to get Hydro Pump to miss on only the 4th attempt, allowing us to go into Dragonair at full health, and at this point, we can employ the exact same strategy as we did against Blaine's Growlithe, Rival 6's Pidgeot, Lorelei's Slowbro, and Bruno's Onix. defense by mimicking Dragonair's agility to allow us to outspeed and one-shot the first Dragonair, followed by the second Dragonair and the Aerodactyl. However, against Dragonite, our Rock Slide misses, allowing Dragonite to use Barrier to raise its defense and tank the next Rock Slide in the green. But still, at no point is Rhyhorn ever in any danger of fainting, and a couple more Rock Slides are all it takes to get the job done and move on to the champion. So, after we heal up and feed our final rare candy to Rhyhorn to level up to 68, we head into the champion's chamber. And ordinarily this battle would be quite a challenge considering that the champion has yet another Gyarados with Hydro Pump on his team, but I actually have one last trick up my sleeve that I prepared for all the way back in the theory crafting stage of this playthrough before even beginning the run. And it's a strategic innovation that I learned from RBY Pokemon Challenges, who you should definitely check out on YouTube by the way, which is to say that after we get past the champions Pidgeot and Alakazam, we can abuse Rhydon's moveset to prepare for the rest of the team. More specifically, Rhydon has 50% to use either Tail Whip or Leer, both of which lower our defense but also badge boost our speed. So because of that, all we have to do is stall out the Rhydon by spamming either Rest or a non-lethal move like Rock Slide and just patiently wait for Rhydon to hit us with a total of 6 badge boosting moves to buff up our speed and guarantee that we're faster than all the remaining Pokemon in the lineup. And by the way, that's exactly why we saved that one rare candy prior to Lorelei and postponed it until just before this fight, because leveling up mid-battle takes away any badge boost setup, so saving a single rare candy until the very end is a great way to guarantee that that won't happen. But regardless, after Rhydon eventually hits us with enough Tail Whips and Leers, our setup is now complete and we can proceed to take out Rhydon with Earthquake, take out Exeggutor with Rock Slide, take out Gyarados with Rock Slide, and take out Charizard with Rock Slide, making us champion of the Pokemon League. Results: Rhyhorn completed the game in 6 hours and 3 minutes game time, 1 hour, 47 minutes, and 53 seconds real time. Conclusion: Rhyhorn is an all-around very lackluster Pokemon that, simply put, just has nothing special going for it. Sure, it does get a couple decent same-type attack bonus moves and a stellar defense stat, but that defense stat is rendered completely meaningless against trainers with heavy-hitting special attackers on their teams, which in the mid to late game is almost all of them. I also find it so fitting that Rhyhorn's level-up moveset is so poor that with the exception of Rhyhorn's solitary starting move in the form of Horn Attack, literally every move that we ever used in the entire run was taught by TM, and we never used a level-up move even once. And granted, Rhyhorn's win rate did drastically improve after defeating Rival 5, but only because we dedicated such an inordinate amount of time to gaining experience in Viridian Forest, the Pokemon Mansion, Cinnabar Gym, Fighting Dojo, Viridian Gym, and Victory Road, all of which was especially tedious given Rhyhorn's slow level-up rate. And in fact, after this run was complete, I ran a few calculations and actually determined that in this playthrough, Rhyhorn just so happened to reach exactly the right level going into Lorelei to outspeed her Dugong and her Cloyster, meaning that the only reason we swept the Elite Four as quickly as we did was thanks to all of our preemptive training. And without that training, Rhyhorn would have been brick-walled at Lorelei, and our final run time likely would have been even longer. Not to mention, the battles against Sabrina, Rival 6, and the entire Elite Four required lots of off-screen theory crafting before even beginning the run in order to be successful. And even in spite of that theory crafting, the very existence of Starmie's Bubble Beam in the Misty fight and Gyarados' Hydro Pump in the Rival 4, Rival 5, and Lance fights racked up dozens of resets that we were completely powerless to do anything about. And finally, add on top of that, all the time wasted training in the early game in preparation for Brock, and in the late game in preparation for Lorelei. So, all in all, given Rhyhorn's weak stats, narrow move pool, and slow level up rate, all of which contributed toward wasted time throughout the early game, mid game, and late game, even in spite of its remarkable consistency in the Elite Four, Rhyhorn has earned its place at the high end of the D tier for Pokemon Solo Challenges in Gen 1, just above Nidoran Male. Once again, I want to give a big shout out to Alexia Wolf on Patreon, who pledged at the Master Ball level and requested this video. Your support and encouragement are what help keep this channel running, so thank you so much for your contribution. Additionally, I also want to give a big thanks to everyone who's been sharing their opinions in the comments, particularly in the Alakazam vs Gyarados video, which broke the record for my most commented video to date. I especially love all of the pre-run predictions, and of those, I especially love the ones that offer not just a prediction, but a detailed analysis. Adam M, for example, has been composing a very detailed prediction in the comments of every single video since the Ditto run. Way to go, Adam! It's always such a treat to read comments like these, because I always learn something from seeing other people's perspective. I hope you all enjoyed this run as much as I did, and before you leave, be sure to give the video a like, as well as subscribe if you haven't already, and ring the bell to be notified of future releases. See you next time, everyone. Take care. Well, I do not anticipate this going very smoothly. Oh boy, okay. Well, do we just spam Earthquake? Wow. Are you serious? First attempt at Mewtwo with a Rhyhorn? Okay. I guess we take those.